Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, publicly announced the message at Mount Safa, and after that moment a new era began in Mecca. Islam was no longer secret. The truth had been spoken openly before everyone. However, this open call seriously disturbed the leaders of the Quraysh. Because this message was not only a religious call, it also shook the idolatrous order, tribal superiority, and the economic system in Mecca. At first, the leaders of the Quraysh did not directly attack the Prophet. Instead, they tried to humiliate him and damage his reputation in the eyes of society. Their goal was simple. If people did not take him seriously, Islam would not spread. For this reason, the leading figures of Mecca began to give him various labels. Sometimes they called him a poet, sometimes a soothsayer, and sometimes a magician. Those who listened to the powerful verses of the Quran felt as if they were spellbound, so they began to explain it by saying, "This is magic." The polytheists were not satisfied with words alone. They imitated the Prophet's walk and mocked the way he spoke. When they saw him, they winked at each other and laughed. The Quran describes this situation as follows: "Those who disbelieve, when they see you, treat you with nothing but mockery." Al-Anbiya 36. Some went even further. When the Prophet spoke, they would laugh loudly to distract people's attention. During this period, one of the Prophet's greatest enemies was his own uncle, Abu Lahab. He did not only reject the message, he also followed the Prophet around and said to people,
"This is my nephew, but what he says is not true. Do not believe him."
At first, the attitude of the Quraysh consisted mostly of mockery and belittlement, but over time it began to turn into physical attacks. It is narrated that while the Prophet was praying at Kaaba, the entrails of a camel were placed on his back. Among those who did this was Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt. The people around began to laugh. Seeing this, his young daughter Fatima bint Muhammad ran to him and cleaned the filth from him. When the Prophet raised his head, he simply made a prayer. Many verses were revealed in the Quran in response to the mockery of the polytheists. Allah commanded his Prophet to be patient, because previous prophets had also been mocked in the same way. The first Muslims were mostly young people, slaves and individuals who did not have strong tribal protection in society. The leaders of the Quraysh specifically began to target these vulnerable people. It was not easy to directly harm Muslims who belonged to strong tribes in Mecca. One of the most unforgettable examples of patience in Islamic history is Bilal ibn Rabah. Bilal was an Abyssinian slave, and his master was Umayyah ibn Khalaf. When Bilal accepted Islam, his master became extremely angry. They would lay him on the burning sands of Mecca under the scorching sun. Heavy stones were placed on his chest, and they shouted,
"Reject Muhammad! Reject Muhammad! Reject Muhammad!"
But only one phrase came from Bilal's mouth: Ahad, Ahad.
Allah one, Allah's one.
Allah is one. Allah is one. These words echoed through the streets of Mecca.
Allah is one.
The torture continued for days. Finally, Abu Bakr paid a great price to purchase Bilal and set him free. The first martyrs in Islamic history were a family: Yasir ibn Amir, his wife Sumayya bint Khayyat, and their son Ammar ibn Yasir. When this family accepted Islam, Abu Jahl, one of the powerful figures of Mecca, subjected them to torture in the desert. For days they were tied under the sun, beaten, and left hungry. One day the Prophet passed by them and saw them helplessly suffering under torture. He said to them, "Be patient, O family of Yasir. Your meeting place will be paradise." These words strengthened their patience, but the oppression did not stop. Eventually Abu Jahl thrust his spear into Sumayya, and she became the first martyr in the history of Islam. The torture inflicted upon Ammar ibn Yasir became even more severe. They threatened him with death and forced him to deny the Prophet. Unable to endure the torture, he was forced to say words of disbelief, but his heart was full of faith. Crying, he came to the Prophet. The Prophet asked him, "How do you find your heart?" Ammar replied,
My heart is full of faith.
My heart is full of faith. The Prophet then said, If they force you again, say the same thing again. Following this event, a verse was revealed in the Quran stating that those who are forced to utter disbelief are not held accountable. During this period, Muslims did not fight back because permission for war had not yet been given. The Prophet constantly advised them to remain patient. Muslims met secretly at night, learned the Quran, and strengthened their faith. Despite all the oppression, Islam continued to spread slowly. However, the pressure in Mecca was increasing. Some Muslims could no longer live safely there. At this point, the Prophet made a very important decision. Some Muslims would leave Mecca and seek a safe life in another land. One day he said to his companions, If only you would go to Abyssinia. There is a just ruler there. In his land, no one is oppressed. The place they would go was a country outside the Arabian Peninsula, Abyssinia. Its ruler was known for his justice, Negus. Thus the first migration in Islamic history began. A small group of Muslims secretly left Mecca. Among them were important companions such as Uthman ibn Affan and the Prophet's daughter Ruqayya bint Muhammad. They reached the coast of the Red Sea and boarded a ship heading toward Abyssinia. Thus, for the first time in Islamic history, Muslims left their homeland in order to protect their faith. The number of those who participated in this first migration was about 15 people. When the leaders of the Quraysh learned that Muslims had escaped to another country, they became very angry because they feared Islam would spread to other lands. Therefore, they decided to send envoys to Abyssinia. The envoys appeared before the Negus and said,
Some young people from our community have fled to your country. They are neither in our religion nor in yours. They have invented a new religion.
Return them to us. The Negus was a just ruler. He did not want to make a decision by hearing only one side, so he decided to listen to the Muslims as well. Speaking on behalf of the Muslims was Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. Ja'far explained their life in Mecca.
We were an ignorant people. We worshipped idols and committed evil deeds. Then a prophet arose among us whom we knew for his truthfulness and trustworthiness. He called us to worship Allah, so we believed in him. Then our people oppressed us, so we sought refuge in your land, where we heard that justice is found.
Then he recited verses from Surah Maryam from the Quran. These verses described Mary and Jesus. When the Negus heard these verses, he was deeply moved. Tears flowed from his eyes and he said, These words and the message brought by Jesus come from the same source. Then he turned to the envoys of Quraysh and said, No, I will not hand them over to you. They are safe in my land. Thus the Muslims began living safely in Abyssinia. This migration was very important in Islamic history because for the first time Muslims were protected in another country and were able to practice their religion freely. However, oppression continued against the Muslims who remained in Mecca. The leaders of the Quraysh made an even harsher decision. They would completely isolate the Muslims and start a major boycott against them. Thus began one of the most difficult periods in Islamic history, the boycott of Banu Hashim. The powerful tribes of Mecca gathered and made a very harsh decision. This decision was written down and hung inside the Kaaba. According to the boycott agreement, no one would trade with Muslims. No one would sell them food. No marriages would be made with them. No one would speak to them. Those who helped them would also be punished. This boycott was not only applied to Muslims, but also to the tribes of Banu Hashim and Banu Muttalib, who protected the Prophet due to tribal tradition. When the boycott began, Muslims and their protecting relatives were forced to withdraw to a narrow valley outside Mecca, known as Shib Abi Talib. They lived there under siege for 3 years. Food was extremely difficult to find. They were not allowed to go to the Meccan markets. Sometimes people secretly brought help, but it was very limited. Hunger became so severe that the cries of children could be heard even outside the valley. Not everyone in Mecca supported the boycott. Some people with conscience secretly helped them. For example, Hisham ibn Amr would bring camels loaded with food to the entrance of the valley at night and release them. In this way, Muslims could reach the food. After 3 years of this heavy siege, some Meccans began to think that this dhulm must end. Several of them gathered and decided to cancel the boycott. When they went to remove the agreement document hanging in the Kaaba, they noticed something interesting. An insect had eaten almost the entire parchment. Only the part containing the name of Allah remained. This event was seen as a sign that the boycott should end, and the agreement was cancelled. Thus, Muslims were freed from the 3-year siege. However, these difficult years were very heavy for the Prophet. Shortly after the boycott ended, he would experience 2 great losses in his life. This period would be known in Islamic history as the Year of Sorrow. On one side was the death of his greatest supporter, his wife Khadija bint Khuwaylid. On the other side was the death of his uncle Abu Talib, who protected him in Mecca. This year became one of the most difficult periods in the Prophet's life. For this reason, this period is called the Year of Sorrow in Islamic history. Despite all these pains, the Prophet did not abandon his mission. He continued calling people to Allah with patience. After this difficult period, the Prophet began searching for a new way to convey Islam to tribes outside Mecca. This search would lead him to a city outside Mecca. Thus began one of the most touching events in Islamic history, the journey to Taif. With this thought, the Prophet decided to travel to Taif, a city about 90 kilometers from Mecca. He did not go alone. With him was his adopted son and loyal companion, Zayd ibn Haritha. Together they set out on a long and difficult journey from Mecca to Taif. The Prophet met with 3 leading brothers of Taif and explained Allah's message to them. He invited them to Islam, but their responses were extremely harsh and hurtful. One of them mockingly said, "Could Allah not find anyone other than you as a prophet?" Another said, "If you are truly Allah's prophet, it is not fitting for us to speak with you. And if you are a liar, then speaking with you is worthless anyway." These words deeply saddened the Prophet. But the worst event happened afterward. The leaders of Taif not only expelled the Prophet from the city, but also set the city's children and slaves against him. A crowd followed behind him, shouting insults and throwing stones. The Prophet and Zayd ibn Haritha tried to leave the city under a rain of stones. The stones wounded the Prophet's feet. Zayd ibn Haritha was also wounded many times while trying to protect him. Eventually, they reached a vineyard outside the city and took refuge there. In that garden, the Prophet was exhausted and in great pain. According to narrations, after this event, an angel was sent to him. The angel said, "If you wish, I will bring these 2 mountains together and destroy the people of Taif." But the Prophet's answer was full of mercy. He said, "No, perhaps from their descendants will come people who worship Allah." This statement shows how merciful the Prophet was toward people. After some time, the Prophet left Taif and returned to Mecca. Although the journey to Taif appeared unsuccessful, it actually paved the way for one of the most important turning points in Islamic history. Because shortly afterward, a miraculous event would occur in the Prophet's life. One of the greatest miracles in Islamic history, the night of Isra and Miraj. The continuation video of our Seerah series about the night of Miraj is available on our channel. You can watch it immediately by clicking the link tagged above.